I love it when I come across a tough nut to crack, and I'm able to crack it. This one started out with a few Google searches, landing on several sites, spouting the same cut and pasted spiel about Masons. Basically, they skip over the Masons part, and then they just say that they're owned by the Monarch Beverage Company. Well, I spent a good hour trying other websites and ancestry records trying to locate one of the Masons' names when it occurred to me to try the good old Google books. So sometimes it's a jackpot of information, and then other times, like these, it only lets me see tiny little snippets. But after researching record after record, one of those snippets ended up being a jackpot. I found their names. So let's find out the Mason part of the Mason root beer on this episode of Antique Bottle Stories. Now here's the record that cracked the story open. In this 1967 record, it lists the company as Mason & Mason Incorporated. President and treasurer is Ralph E. Mason. Vice president is Henry. My first thought is that they're brothers, but they're actually father and son. Ralph, the president, is the son. Henry's the dad. He's the vice president. So I want to start with Henry. Now, Henry Mason was born in 1892 in Illinois. But actually, I want to back up one more and I want to look at his parents because there's an important piece of the puzzle that you need to know about them. Now, his parents were both immigrants from Russia. They met and married in Wisconsin. His dad's name was Raphael Manasowitz, but he Americanized his name to Ralph Mason. So the Mason name isn't their true family name. I thought that was interesting. So now looking at this 1900 census, it tells us a good amount of information. The first son is born in Wisconsin, the second one is born in Illinois, and then the third and fourth son were back in Wisconsin. We can see from this census that Raphael, or Ralph, immigrated in 1888 at age 24, and his wife Golda came in 1882 when she was 10 years old. She goes by Goldie. It says that Ralph was a peddler with a comma, and then it says rags. So he was a peddler of rags. We can also see that they've been married for 11 years. She's 28 and he's 36. It also says that she's had 5 children and 4 of them survive. So just to wrap up Raphael, he died 2 years after the census in 1902 at age 38, leaving young Goldie with 4 small boys. And as tragic as that is, and I'm interested to know how he died so young, I'm really not going to spend any more time on them. We've got the background story, and Henry is the son that we're researching, so let's move on with him. So let's jump ahead to when Henry is working. Here in 1920, he's married to Rose, and they have 2 boys. He's a plumber at the time. Notice the son named Ralph. Now that's the one he ends up making the root beer with. So Ralph was born in Wisconsin in 1915. The first time I see Ralph in the papers is 1940, and he's graduating from college. They're in Illinois at this point. And we can see from this 1940 census that the 2 boys are in their 20s, living with their parents, all working in the extract business. It says Henry owns his own business and the 2 boys are salesmen. That same year, 1940, Ralph marries Evelyn. This World War II registration tells us that his name is Ralph E. Mason and that the E is only an initial. It gives the address of the house and also the name of the business, High Grade Extract Company. It also gives the address of the business. So you know what that means. We got to go find it. So that business would actually be somewhere in this plaza. And just for giggles, he lives in this building. So according to the original Wikipedia story online, they started manufacturing the root beer in 1947. 1949 is the first time I see Mason's root beer in the paper. 1950 census, we see Ralph is listed as executive of beverage company. At this point, he's 35, and his dad Henry would be 58. You can see Ralph's 2 kids are still too young to be part of the business. In 1950, we already see there's a Mason root beer bowling team. 1950 also shows there's a little ad here for a movie theater offering special discounts for the root beer for the kids. Apparently there's another Ralph E. Mason running around in Chicago somewhere, which is a pain. It says here that he is an employee of the Western Cartridge Company, so I'm gonna say that this is a different guy. So when I came across all of these articles about Ralph Mason being a business education college professor at University of Illinois, I'm really not sure which Ralph we're talking about. And I don't know, but he ended up writing a textbook in business education. But I really don't think it's our Ralph. So in 1952, here's a little rubber mold to make root beer popsicles. And here's a photo of the bottle. In 1954, it's being advertised in Oklahoma, so we've branched out to a larger audience now. 1954 Patent Office shows the Masons logo, and it says it's been in use since 1947, so that matches up. 1956, a simple half-page ad in the paper, and it started getting recognized for its unique taste. They called it straight from the keg flavor. 1963, new arrival in town. This ad printed in Pennsylvania and in Iowa. Here's 1969, the bottle design changed. Now the original story says that in 1970, the Rheingold Corporation came on the soda scene and bought up Grapette, Dr. Wells, and Mason & Mason. But this source gives the date October 1972 for the acquisition. It tells us that Mason & Mason was a manufacturer of concentrate, which it sold to over 90 franchised bottlers in 33 states. It goes on to say that Rheingold had been in the beer distribution business since 1964. Now back to the Wikipedia source, it says that in 1975, Rheingold was purchased by Pepsi in a hostile takeover. Then, a few years later, Pepsi was forced to divest some of its brands, so they gave up Mason's, which Monarch Beverage Company then acquired. I didn't see anything in the papers about any of this. Now, Henry Mason, the father, died in 1971 at age 79. That might have weighed in the decision-making for selling the company. 1974, we're still trucking along. 1977, the bottle design changed again. 1977, we've got some 64-ounce bottles. They don't look embossed, and those labels wouldn't last, so those are just going to be regular slicks. This 1986 little corner store sold Mason root beer in Indiana. The last ad that I see for Mason's is in 1987 in Nebraska. Ralph died in 1990 at age 75. I checked the status of his son Bruce just to see if he was involved with the business, and I don't know too much about him. He was only 40 years old when he died, Bruce was. He died before his dad, Ralph, and he died in Colorado. So I couldn't find an obituary for either one of them, but by the looks of it, it doesn't look like Bruce was really involved with the company. So like I said, Mason's is currently owned by the Monarch Beverage Company, and you can still buy it. It's about $3.75 a bottle on Amazon. But I guess it's just expensive because it's not much better here from Beverages Direct. So let's go back and get some of these bottles dated. Here's all the bottles that I came across in the newspapers. 1949 doesn't look like it had a design. At first glance, it looks like the 50s and 60s were the same, but if you look a little closer, 1952 here has the shoulder has the squiggle embossing, and then it's kind of a straight neck. Then in 1954, it's the same thing. But compare the shoulder of 1952 to 1963. See, 1963, the Mason logo is different, and it has the squiggle there under the Mason logo, and the shoulder is much smoother from the squiggle to the neck. 1963 bottles look more narrow than the 1969 one. The 1969 one has more of a curved shoulder than 63. The 1977 are much less curved than the 1969, and the logo changed slightly again. I also need to note that there were clear bottles and ambers. These ambers look to be from the 50s. Nowadays it just looks like a generic slick beer bottle. Well, let's look at my bottle I've got here. The ACL is pretty worn on this one, and judging by the curvy design, I would say it's the closest to the 1969 one. And I'm glad we were able to give this bottle the story it deserved. And that's going to do it for today. You guys have a wonderful day. Thanks for watching.